And if you use the balance scorecard correctly, you can see if we identified, let's say, an area in the customer perspective or the customer dimension that we want to change, then you can see what is the impact on the finance and the business. So it's also helping you to see the impact on the other areas of the business. So it's really a very good model and a framework to use if you use it correctly.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I'm your host Drishti, and today we have a CX expert joining us on the show. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code digital CX platform, which is available across 14 channels with 45,000 solutions created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by IMC, Tech World CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Michelle Bandenhorst is the Map and Keys CX strategy advisor. She is also a business coach, customer experience leadership coach, and management consultant. She works in partnership with business owners and leaders to grow their company and solve business transformation obstacles related to customer experience. She is passionate about providing effective solutions that are focused and measurable. Michelle's combined knowledge of tools and customer experience has benefited business and teams tremendously. So, hi Michelle, we are really happy to have you on Engati CX.
Hi, Dristri. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this awesome platform.
So, before we dive into the interview with Michelle, don't forget to subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon below to get access to exclusive content from thought leaders around the world. So, Michelle, according to you, what would be the ideal way to become truly customer centric while remaining profitable as well? So, like, how can organizations design these customer interactions and that exceed or match to customer expectations?
So I would like to start with a definition of customer centricity, if that's okay with you. So in my mind, or in my view, customer centricity is much more than just a strategic intent or a strategy. At its core, customer centricity is how a business chooses to make business decisions and spend their money. So it's about being open and honestly putting your customers as or seeing your customers as your most value asset in the organization. And second to that is your employees. So it's very much a mindset around how we as an organization make business decisions and how we can see the evidence that customers and employees are actually in the center of the decision-making process. So I'm of the opinion that this type of behavior, it's often a behavior, will guarantee huge business success and a sustainable business in the long run. So it's not so much a specific approach as to a mindset and a behavior. With regards to exceeding expectations, and again, this is my opinion, I think organizations aren't even getting the basics right. They're not getting the simple things right. So designing interactions where you exceed expectation is something that they shouldn't even be considering at this stage. So often I find that companies are busy fixing the things that are going wrong, which is really as an outcome of random experiences. So if you think of the maturity level, the experience is random. There's a problem, and they're very good at fixing those problems, but they're nowhere near to what we call an intentional experience. Now, when you have an intentional experience, that's when you are, as an organization, you are proactively looking at your experiences, you're looking at your touch points, and you are proactively working on improving those experiences. So I think, yes, exceeding expectations is great, but in terms of the maturity level, I don't think organizations are there yet because they aren't even getting the basic things right. So I hope that answers the question.
Right, that's true, and that's a concern really. So, how do you define customer experience quality framework that evaluates customer perception?
So we know that customers' perceptions of the organization um, is formed. There's lots of factors and influences. It's both internal and external factors that influences. It's things like their mental understanding of how their mental accounting systems. It's external factors like what am I seeing, what am I perceiving from other brands, from other companies. So these are all things that influences customers' perspectives. So from as an organization, there needs to be some kind of a thinking or a process around how you're going to measure these perceptions. And that can be quite tricky if you think of what is perceptions. So you're probably going to have a framework where you gather both quantitative and qualitative information across your end-to-end journey, and you need to consider both relational and transactional metrics. So it's really about finding a systematic way and thinking through it systematically in terms of what are your touch points, where can you collect data, what type of data do you need, quantitative, qualitative, and all of these things, and then translate that into a framework. And that can be things like product information, it can be NPS surveys, it can even be qualitative customer interviews. So it's quite a big subject in its own, and I think it will differ depending on the objectives that the company have. But it starts by identifying your touch points, identifying what type of data and how we're going to measure that data in a consistent way. Yeah, that would be my advice.
Right. So, what you mean is that wherever customer touch points or the whole customer journey should be kind of recorded, and from there we can um, take out or take some insights.
Maybe not the whole customer journey, but definitely your key moments of truth
Hmm.
in the various stages of your journey. Oftentimes we see that companies do a NPS survey, but it's very transactional. It's at a transaction point. I've just completed the sale, and now you ask me about how was this interaction. So it's very transactional, and it's not asking me to evaluate my end-to-end experience with regards to the journey. So identify key moments across the touch points and journey stages, and then and have various measures. You can't just have NPS and trust on that one metric, because that is oftentimes, there's pros and cons for using NPS, but I think it needs to be an holistic measurement framework. Yeah.
So, how should businesses define their success and then outline what growth they need to achieve the goals, maybe for customer-centric goals, and what are the metrics that should be taken in consideration?
So I've thought about this question quite a bit. And I think what is important to highlight here is that business success is determined or measured by the business stakeholders and the investors' perception of value. So you need to understand what your stakeholders and your investors perceive as value, and then that needs to translate into a model. And again, your stakeholders can be either internal and external. For instance, customers is an external source of stakeholders. So something that I've been looking at and incorporating quite recently is the balance scorecard as a strategic tool or method to measure success in an organization. And the reason why I think this is a very good model, it helps you to define and share, first and foremost, what it is that you're trying to achieve as an organization. It helps you to define and look at your day-to-day actions. So what are the things that you're doing today and that creates value? It helps you to identify what needs to change. And then importantly, it helps you to see if you are making progress. The balance scorecard focuses on 4 different perspectives. I don't know if you know the balance scorecard, and the reason why it's called balance is because it's focused on both financial and non-financial areas of the business. So the 4 lenses or the 4 areas that the balance scorecard cover is the financial aspect. So it helps you to look at the financial performance of the organization. Then it adds a lens or a layer for the customer perspective. So this then ultimately helps you to evaluate the performance from the business from a customer's perspective and how well you are performing with regards to their perception. And this speaks to your perception metrics that we spoke about earlier. And then, of course, then there's internal perspective. So the internal perspective talks about our ability to efficiently our efficiency as an organization. So that helps us to look at things like our products, our services, and our business processes. So it's an internal measure. And then, of course, the organizational layer or the people layer helps us to look at our people, and it can also include things like your technology and things. So those are all the enablers in the business and help us to evaluate that. So for me, the balance scorecard is a very good framework to use in an organization because it helps you to think of all the elements in the organization and then to identify specific metrics in all 4 of those dimensions across the business.
Right, that helps in balancing both customer experience and financials because I guess one of the like it's not like people do not want to go beyond and do something for the customer, but I guess some due to financial crunches they are restricted on performing certain actions or services to go beyond. So that should
Yes.
definitely help. Yeah.
And if you use the balance scorecard correctly, you can see if we identified, let's say, an area in the customer perspective or the customer dimension that we want to change, then you can see what is the impact on the finance and the business. So it's also helping you to see the impact on the other areas of the business. So it's really a very good model and a framework to use if you use it correctly.
That's right. So, is the development of voice of customer programs and CX measurement framework, are these frameworks beneficial?
Definitely, I think there's definitely a place for all of these. So voice of the customer or VOC is a term that it's often described as a customer feedback mechanism. So it helps us to collect data, it helps us to analyze the data, and then also even understand the brand perception. So it's definitely an important element or part of the overall customer experience. And the reason why it's so important is we know that customer perception of quality is a key driver for business success. So you can't ignore the voice of the customer because it's very rich information about the customer. So a well-planned strategic VOC program should be able to help you to drive change throughout the organization. So it shouldn't be seen as a tactic. It should be seen as a strategic initiative that should sit across the organization and should be, there should be buy-in from the entire organization. So what that program will help you, it will help you to get information from various touch points across all the organization. So it will also help you to remove the silos in the business and everyone will be able to see the impact. But what I sometimes see that VOC is specific to a specific touch point or single touch point. So it's oftentimes we see with VOC, organizations pick only specific, like for instance, the NPS survey. Then they say this is our VOC program, but they only have a single touch point. And they're only collecting data on that touch point and only analyzing that. So to my mind, that is not a best practice in terms of a proper VOC system. So a VOC is a very narrow view of your organization and will only give you information specifically to that incident, and you won't be able to find the broader context. So building a VOC program should consider things like what are our goals, in the organization. Why do we want? You have to think about this. Why? What's the purpose? What's the intent? What is the thing that we actually want to measure? So measures and VOCs goes together hand in hand. VOC for me is the means of collecting the data in order for us to measure. So you can't really separate the metrics and the VOC from each other. And I think what the VOC should be doing very well, if it's working correctly, it should be able to align. So you should be able to align your VOC feedback with the rest of the organization, like your process data and your voice of the employee and all of that stuff. So a proper VOC should be able to align all, we call it those three voices. It should be able to align your employee voice, your process voice, and your customer voice, and then give you an holistic view of the end-to-end experience. Oh, sorry, and I just want to add, and with regards to the metrics, like I said, for me, metrics and VOCs, it goes hand in hand. Of course, the key reason why you have metrics is it helps you to identify and prioritize CX improvement. So that's the reason why you should have it. So when you have a proper VOC with a CX framework or a CX measurement framework, you should be able to have a proper CX improvement list. So top 5 lists of CX improvements that's prioritized based on actionable data and actual data.
Right. So, what do you think are the problems or the pitfalls in the B2B customer journey mapping? And how can we identify or rectify and then evaluate the journey completely?
So some of the pain points or the challenges that pitfalls that I've seen in the projects and the businesses that I've worked at, oftentimes we tend to skip the research. Many organizations think we know our customers, so they go into mapping the journey, but they're doing it purely from a business perspective and a business view. So I think what we need to do there is we need to acknowledge and recognize the value of actual research and bringing that actual research and those insights into the journey mapping tool. It often requires a little bit more time and more resources to do the research up front, but that is, if you can't have a customer there, that is the closest that you're going to get to mapping the actual journey is with insights, with real research and insights. That's the one thing. The other thing is we oftentimes just ignoring the customer. We don't have a view of who the customer is. We don't have the personas defined. So we just go in and we just think, we'll do this thing based on what we know. And we're not giving the customer the real value in the journey that they need. And the third thing is this: it's often done in silo. It's often done by a person that's got the title of customer journey management owner, or it's a CX, someone in CX. So it's often a person or a CX function that is mapping a part of the journey instead of being a collaborative exercise with the whole business or a broader part of the business. So the best way to do this is to identify all your stakeholders in the journey, end-to-end journey, and to have representation of all those stakeholders in these journey sessions, and then to get them to collaborate collectively. And the second last one is we often see that people focus on the touch points and not the journey. So we often see that people, they identify key moments or key touch points, and then they start and they do a deep dive into those touch points without having an end-to-end view of the journey before that. We often go into the purchasing part of the journey, and we want to fix the purchasing part of the journey or the after sales, but we don't have a view of the end-to-end journey with all the touch points. So best practice again is start with defining your end-to-end journey or journeys, how many journeys there are, and then go and then start. So start doing. I'm always thinking of a T. So start with the top part of the T before you go into the down bit, and find a way to prioritize where to go deep. And a metrics is a good approach in terms of going deep, doing the analysis to help you identify. And then last, which I think is the most important, is it's not about the journey map. The journey map is not the outcome. The journey map is the tool to facilitate a discussion around what is the problem, what do we need to fix, what are the root cause problem here, and what can we do to improve it. So you first work towards getting the map so that you can facilitate a discussion with the broader part of the business. So those are the key pain points or areas that I see when companies engage in customer journey mapping or management.
That's true actually. So, are there any other sound bites that you would like to leave with our audience?
So I think where we are now, it's more than ever. It's important for us to be considered as a trusted brand. So people want to continue to do business with companies that they trust and who share their values and who they feel act on their behalf and their best interests. So I think it's important to recognize that the role of the CX professional is moving towards building and earning trust. So our roles are much more around facilitating those, facilitating trust and building trust in the organization. And as a CX leader, I think we need to be focusing on building trust at 3 levels. And those levels are first and foremost is we need to find ways to earn the trust of our customers by eliminating or then reducing uncertainty. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that or area that we need to focus on is earning the trust of our executive leaders. And the way that we would do that is by empowering them to make value added, customer centric decisions. So make sure you have the data and provide them with the data so that they can make those customer centric decisions. And last but not least is earn the trust of your colleagues by empowering them to execute and deliver on this consistent quality customer experience across all touch points and across all channels.
That sounds really helpful and insightful. So thank you so much, Michelle, for giving us your time. The thoughts that you have shared, I guess, are very, very valuable, and the audience will really enjoy this interview.
Thank you so much. And thank you once again for giving me the opportunity just to share my views.
Thank you. So we'll be back with a brand new episode and brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one.